Let's take a look at this passage. Immigrants' adoption of English as their primary language is one measure of assimilation into the larger United States society. Generally, languages define social groups and provide justification for social structures. Hence, a distinctive language sets a cultural group off from the dominant language groups. Throughout United States history, this pattern has resulted in one consistent, unhappy consequence: discrimination against members of the cultural minority. Language differences provide both a way to rationalize subordination and a ready means for achieving it. Let's pause here and see what this passage is. The first paragraph, it talks about when immigrants, people who come from other countries to your country, when they adopt English as their primary language, it is one way where they can be a part of the regular society. And it says that languages actually justify the social structures. The different groups in society are often defined with the measure of language, and if the language is very separate, very distinct, it is differentiated from the others. But in the United States, because of this, there's also an unhappy consequence. What happens? Those who belong to a cultural minority are discriminated against, right? So the language difference, it also helps to rationalize subordination. That is, when X says that you are my subordinate, it helps X justify why he's calling somebody his inferior, and it is also a means of actually making other people under you. Continuing, traditionally, English has replaced the native language of immigrant groups by the second or third generation. Some characteristics of today's Spanish-speaking population, however, suggest the possibility of a departure from this historical pattern. So it says that usually English became the language. The native language was forgotten and English became the first language in 2 or 3 generations. But if you take a look at the Spanish-speaking population, then this pattern is violated. It's a departure. It is different from what has regularly happened. Many families retain ties in Latin America and move back and forth between their present and former communities. It says Latin America, that is South America, right? So for Latin American people from that, Colombia, Peru, Venezuela, Brazil, these are all called Latin American countries. So it says many families, they actually have some members in Latin America, so they go from one community to another and back and so on. So this revolving door phenomenon, that is keeping on going in and out, along with the high probability of additional immigrants from the south, means that large Spanish-speaking communities are likely to exist in the United States for the indefinite future. So English is bucked and Spanish is also predominant. This expectation underlies the call for national support for bilingual education in Spanish-speaking communities' public schools. Bilingual education, that is education in 2 languages, can serve different purposes. However, in the 1960s, such programs were established to facilitate the learning of English so as to avoid disadvantaging children in their other subjects because of limited English. So for those who are not having English as their native language, by teaching them English as well as their local language, they could understand English also and the other subjects in their own language. More recently, many advocates have viewed bilingual education as a means to maintain children's native languages and cultures. This issue is important for people with different political agendas, from absorption at one pole to separatism at the other. So the people who say that it is important to teach children in 2 languages so that they learn their culture, this has different implications. One, of course, the political agendas, right? To date, the evaluation of bilingual education's impact on learning have been inconclusive. Till now, nobody has been able to clearly say what is the outcome of this teaching in 2 languages. The issue of bilingual education has nevertheless served to unite the leadership of the nation's Hispanic communities. People from having a Latin American background are called Hispanics. So this bilingual education issue, all the leaders from the Hispanic community, they have come together because of this. Grounded in concerns about status that are directly traceable to the United States history of discrimination against Hispanics, the demand for maintenance of Spanish language in the schools is an assertion of the worth of a people and the culture. So knowing how the Hispanics were discriminated against, they want Spanish as a second language so that the people belonging to that culture and the culture of the people is preserved. If the United States is truly a multicultural nation, that is, if it is one culture reflecting the contributions of many, this demand should be seen as a demand not for separation but for inclusion. More direct efforts to force inclusion can be misguided. For example, movements to declare English the official language do not truly advance the cohesion of a multicultural nation. So they're saying that as of now there is no official language, but if English is declared to be the official language, then this may be difficult. This may put difficulties in the path of bringing all the different cultures together. Making one language more important than the other would actually harm the cause of being multicultural. They alienate the 20 million people who do not speak English as their mother tongue. If you declare English to be the official language, then non-English speakers may be considered second. They are unnecessary since the public's business is already conducted largely in English. So people who don't have English as the mother tongue might actually get excluded if English is considered the national official language. Further, given the present state of understanding about the effects of bilingual education and learning, it would be unwise to require the universal use of English. Finally, it is for parents and local communities to choose the path they will follow, including how much of their culture they want to maintain for the children. So it said that don't impose English upon people. Let the local communities decide how much they want to keep English, how much of their local culture they should be allowed to follow, and so on and so forth. Let's now take a look at the questions that follow. It can be inferred from the passage that one of the characteristics of immigrant groups to the United States has traditionally been that after immigration, relatively few members of the group. Okay, remember revolving door, how we saw that the English, although second and third generation became the primary language, does not happen with Spanish speaking people because of the revolving door thing. They have some family in the Latin American countries as well. So option B, that they moved back and forth repeatedly between US and former communities, is obviously the right answer. Second, the passage suggests that one of the effect of the debate over bilingual education is what? So we have seen how the leaders of the Spanish speaking communities, the Hispanic communities, were actually united because of this. So option D, that it provided a common banner under which the Spanish speaking communities could rally, is directly given from the passage. Third one, in lines 38, 39, the phrase different political agendas, right? The different political agendas is basically to what extent the Hispanic should blend into the US society. If I go back to the passage and you take a look at the political agendas, it talks about absorption at one pole and separatism at the other. So it's all about blending the communities. Fourth question says, in line 64-65, the author says it would be unwise to require the universal use of English. Now clearly we have seen that it is unclear, it is inconclusive. Search for this word. The word inconclusive is used. Whether it promotes or hinders the education of children whose English is limited. Now that is the answer in this particular case. Fifth one says, in the last para, the author of the passage is primarily concerned with what? So in the last passage, he clearly says nothing should be forced. The parents and the communities should be able to decide on their own on how much of their own culture they want to include. So A, reasons against enacting a measure that would mandate the forced inclusion of immigrant groups within the dominant United culture is obviously the right answer. So as if you read the passage a bit slowly and understand it, right, passage by passage, just take a more minute, then most of the things you'll be able to retain and crack it easily.